Welcome to Excel and Business Math video number 3. Hey, in this video, we got to talk about Excel's golden rule for creating formulas, formula inputs, and Excel models. Now, here's our topics. We're, of course, going to talk about Excel's golden rule. We'll define what if analysis is, what an Excel model is, and we'll talk about why Excel's golden rule is so important. Now, there's 3 parts to the Excel's golden rule. The first part, if a formula input can change, put it into a cell and refer to it in your formula with cell references. Sounds like we've already been doing that one. Part 2, if a formula input will not change, you can type it into a formula like 12 months in a year or 7 days in a week. So if you have to use the number 12 that represents months in a year, that number is never going to change. So you don't have to refer to it in a formula with a cell reference. You can just type 12 into your formula. The third part, always label your formula inputs so that the formula input can be clearly understood by any user of the spreadsheet solution. Now, all 3 parts, we've already been following this rule in the first 2 videos for this class. Now, this is the example we're just going to do in a second. But notice here's our formula. We are referring to numbers with cell references. And look at this. This formula is to calculate the score after extra credit for students in a class. Here's the score for the class. There's the extra credit points. Notice cell reference, cell reference. We would never type the numbers 787 and 35 into our formulas because those numbers can change. And very importantly, we don't just put the number in a cell and refer to it. We actually put the number in the cell and label it. So when we come back and look at this tomorrow or someone else looks at it, they know exactly what that 35 means. It means the extra credit points. Not only that, but when we follow Excel's golden rule, we are allowed to do what-if analysis. And all what-if analysis means is, what would happen if we change the extra credit points to 40 instead of 35? We change the number, everything updates, we can see exactly what happens. So what-if analysis actually follows directly from following Excel's golden rule. We label it, put the number right there, refer to it in the formula. Then when we change it, everything updates. Also, what's an Excel model? Well, this is an example of a simple Excel model. We build it, change the formula input, and can watch everything change. Not only that, but with a model, anytime we build a formula like this, next quarter I can just change the names and the scores, and everything will update. Now, let's go look at our 3 examples we're going to see in this video. We're going to go first to EGR1. Here it is. You are a teacher's assistant. The teacher asks you to add 35 extra points to each student's score for the class. Well, the first thing is you have to recognize that that's a formula input. We need to use the same exact number for every single calculation. We're also going to have to add an extra column here. So let's start by adding the extra column. Well, if this is the score for the class, the new column, we have to have a name for it. So we're going to call it something smart like score after extra credit. Now, notice that when I typed, it's hanging over the edge, but I'm going to Control-Enter because I want to put the thing in the cell and keep the cell selected. We're going to learn how to use word wrap. Now, word wrap, if I click this, it automatically adds however many extra lines I need to accommodate the text. Now, I want to add some formatting. So I'm going to go up to the Home, Font Group, click the drop-down, and add this dark blue for fill color. Then I'm going to click the font color, that's the letter A, and choose something like white font. I'm also going to use the border button and say all borders. Now, I'm going to create a formula here, and I'm going to follow the convention that we're using. Since formulas are going to be through all these cells, we're going to add a fill color using fill color drop down. You don't see all these. I want you to go to More Colors. Under More Colors, there's Custom and Standard. And right near the middle, I'm going to choose that green right there. Click OK. Now I'm going to use the All Borders button. Now we want to create our formula, but before we can create our formula, we need to type out the label and the formula input. I'm going to type extra credit points, Control Enter. Now notice the words are hanging out. I don't want to wrap the text here. So I'm going to point between B and C. And when I see the change column with cursor, I'm going to click and drag. Now with that cell selected, I'm going to choose, actually I'm going to choose red, fill, white font, all borders. I tend to use red fill and white font for a formula input just to indicate that this is an important part of the Excel solution. Now I'm going to type the number 35, Control Enter, and then add an all border. Now we're ready to create our formula. Click in cell C8, equal sign starts all formulas. I'm going to use my left arrow to get a relative cell reference. As we copy down, we always need to look one to the left, plus, and now I'm going to get cell C5, and that is C5. We need to lock it, make it absolute, so I hit the F4 key. And there's our formula. Control Enter. Point to the fill handle. And when we see our angry rabbit, double click and send it down. Always when you copy a formula, go to the last cell and hit F2. We're verifying that the cell references are pointing to the correct location. Notice, relative cell reference, locked, absolute. Now when I hit Enter, when the teacher comes in, and you're the teacher's assistant, and says, hey, I changed my mind. The extra credit is really 30 points. You simply click in the cell, type a 30, and every single formula is looking at that single cell. So when I hit Enter, instantly I've changed. But you say, hey, teacher, what if we gave everyone 40? No problem. What if? I click in the cell, I change the formula input, and Enter, and instantly our what if question is answered. There are all the scores if we give all students 40 extra credit points. Now, if you look in the PDF notes, this is straight from the PDF notes, what if analysis. Anytime you ask a what if question, you're doing what if analysis. We changed from 35 to 40 points, and instantly we got our answer to our what if question. And again, when we follow Excel's golden rule, it's easy for us to ask what if questions because we simply change the formula input and see the answer to our what if questions. All right, we're going to go over to example number 2. I'm going to click on the sheet EGR2. Here's example 2. You are an accountant that must record the monthly insurance expense. So over here in this column, we're going to have to calculate the monthly insurance expense for each one of the items that the company owns. 4 delivery trucks, 2 different forklifts, an employer consumer policy for insurance, and then 2 warehouses. You have been emailed the below table of annual insurance expenses. So this is the table that you were emailed, and this is the column with the annual expenses. Now, before you can record each monthly insurance expense, you must 1, 2, 3. So you have 3 instructions. The first one, calculate a 10% discount for each annual insurance expense. So in the discount column, we're going to have to calculate the amount of the discount. That is a 10% discount off of each one of the annual expense amounts. Second, we have to subtract discount to get the discounted annual expense. So here we'll simply take annual insurance expense and minus the discount, copy it down. Finally, we'll have to divide the discounted annual expense by 12 to get the monthly insurance expense. So in this column, from our discounted annual expense, we'll calculate monthly insurance expense. Now, anytime you're given instructions like this, you have to read through and figure out what are the formula inputs. Now, we already have the actual annual insurance expense. Those are formula inputs set up in a proper table where each row describes the particular item being insured, policy number, and the annual insurance expense. All right, so as we read through this, calculate a 10% discount. Well, discounts are definitely something that's going to be a formula input and definitely has the potential to change. So we're going to come over here and type out a good name and put our 10% discount. As we read through, the only other formula input is going to be the number 12. That means 12 months. Since that number is never going to change, we actually don't have to type a label and put the 12 in the cell. We can just put the number 12 directly into our formula, copy the formula down. Now, before we can actually do this, notice it says a 10% discount. Now, this is a business math class, and we haven't got to the topic fractions, decimals, and percentages. We will cover that later in the class. But when we say percentages, it just means how many parts out of 100. So 10% always is going to mean 10 parts out of 100. Now, for us in this class, many times we're going to be talking about money. So anytime you have a percentage, in our example, 10%, that means 10 pennies for every $1. Now, in this class, we'll see lots of percentages that have to do with money. Discounts, markups, tax rates, all sorts of situations where we're using percentages. Anytime we have a 10% discount or tax rate, it just means 10 pennies for every $1. All right, let's create our first formula input, 10%. Now, over here, somewhere off to the side or above, I'm going to put my label and then put the number. Now, we always want to have a smart label. Since this is a discount on the annual insurance expense, that's exactly what I'm going to type here. Discount on annual insurance expense. Now, I'm going to use Control-Enter because I definitely want to add some word wrap here. Home, alignment group, and word wrap. That's an example of style format. Let's do some more style format. I'm going to use the drop-down and select red fill. Notice the actual fill bucket was already red, so I can simply click on the fill bucket and it adds the red. Font, it's already white, so I'm going to click on that. Otherwise, use your drop-down. I'm also going to add all borders. Now I'm going to click over here. We're going to put our number and do all borders. Now, we haven't officially talked about what a percentage is in this class, so I'm simply going to enter this as 10 pennies. Now, watch this. This is Excel being polite. I'm going to type decimal and then 1. When I Control-Enter, notice it adds the leading 0 in. Now, I want this to literally look like 10 pennies. So now I'm going to come up to the number group. That means the number formatting group, and use the increase decimal. So when I increase decimal, now it looks like 10 pennies. Now, I said it looks like 10 pennies because remember in our first video, we saw that number formatting is a facade. Facade just means something we see on the surface of the cell or our Excel worksheet. There it is. 1, 2, 3, 4 characters. But if you look up into the formula bar, we can clearly see that 0 after the 1 is not really in the cell. That is just being displayed by using number formatting. Now, again, later in the class, we'll see how to format decimals or fractions as percentages. But for right now, that's going to be our discount. In fact, in this class, anytime we have a discount, we are going to be able to either express it as a fraction, as a decimal, or as a percentage. And they'll all be numerically equivalent. But for now, that's our discount, 10 pennies for every $1. Now let's create our formula. The discount, equal sign, left arrow to get the annual insurance expense. And I'm going to multiply it by, and now I'm going to use my mouse because it's far enough away, to click on J10. Now I need to lock that. As I copy down, it needs to be locked, so I hit the F4 key. And that's our formula. Always looking 1 to the left times locked on our discount. Control-Enter. Point to my fill handle and double-click and send it down. Go to the last cell and hit F2. I can't stress how important that last step of F2ing is. In this class, lots of students hand in tests where they copied the formula down and they didn't check it. Now, most of the time, it's going to be fine, but definitely I have people handing in where that cell wasn't locked, and so it's not correct. So please do yourself a favor and always check. Out there in the working world, since you're in charge of building the Excel solution, you're not worried about a grade, you're worried about your job. So always go to the last cell and hit F2. That's looking good. I'm going to hit Enter. Now the discounted annual expense, equal sign, left arrow to get the annual expense minus left arrow to get the discount. Those are both relative cell references, so Control Enter, double click and send it down. Man, I'm so glad we have Excel instead of having to do all of these calculations on a handheld calculator. Now, monthly insurance expense. Notice that's the discounted amount. There was the original amount. That's the amount subtracting that 10% discount. But now, for each cell in the monthly insurance expense column, we need to take equal sign, left arrow, as a relative cell reference, the discounted annual expense. And now I'm going to divide. Divide is / in Excel. You can either use the division symbol on the number pad, or it's to the left of the Shift key on the standard part of the keypad. Now, I'm simply going to type a 12. I am not violating Excel's golden rule because that's an example of a number that will never change. Control Enter, double click and send it down. Go to the last cell and hit F2. That's looking good. Now, in this example here, we saved a lot of time because we were able to make lots of calculations quickly by creating formulas and copying them down. And we properly read through the description of what is required for all the calculations. Any number that was going to be a formula input, we labeled it, put it in a cell, and referred to it in our formula with a cell reference. Over here, we had our formula input that wasn't going to change, so we simply typed it in. Now, another topic in this video that we mentioned is what is an Excel model? An Excel model is an Excel solution that we build to solve a problem that we will use more than one time. Examples of Excel models, well, that extra credit student score table, that was a model because we can use it next period. This monthly insurance expense table, it's definitely a model because guess what? We built all the formulas and put the discount here. So next year, I simply type whatever the amounts are here, put in whatever the discount is, and everything will update. Not only that, but as a model, if the person who sent us the email with the instructions got the 10% discount wrong, the boss comes over and says, it's not 10%, it's 4%. Now I need 4 pennies here, so I'm going to type 0.04. And when I hit Enter, everything instantly updates. That is the magic and beauty of Excel, the power of Excel's golden rule, and the power of building a model. If we were on a handheld calculator, what would we have done? Wow. We would have had to recalculate every single discount by hand with the new 4%, every single discounted annual expense, and every single insurance expense. That is the power of Excel. Now, anytime we follow Excel's golden rule, we are creating an Excel model. And we can use it for what-if analysis, like we did with the extra credit student score table, or simply change formula inputs for a new time period. Like with either one of these, we can do that. So building Excel models to do what-if analysis and following Excel's golden rule, it's simply the power of Excel and the power you will gain from this class to do your job out there in an efficient way. Now, one more important note about Excel's golden rule. Notice formula inputs change, put it in a cell. Formula inputs don't change, you don't have to put them in a cell. If you're not sure, by all means, put it in a cell and label it. If you on a test or in your job put this 12 in a cell and labeled it, that would be much better than doing the reverse, which would be to hard code a number into a formula. So over in the PDF notes when you read Excel's golden rule, it has a little note. And it says, if you can't decide whether the formula input will change, then go ahead and put it in a cell. Now let's go over to our next example, EGR, Excel's golden rule number 3. Example 3, we need to subtract the exemption amount of $250 from each employee's gross pay to calculate taxable pay. So in this column, we'll simply subtract the $250 from each one of the gross pays, copy it down. Then we calculate the deduction for each employee by multiplying taxable pay by 10%. So there's the taxable pay. Every single employee's taxable pay needs to be multiplied by 10%. That's the deduction that will be taken out of taxable pay. And then finally, we calculate net pay, which is just taxable pay minus deduction. Now, as we read through instructions like this, we have to determine what are the formula inputs. Well, exemption amount, everything in taxes has the possibility of changing. So that's definitely a formula input. Now, I'm actually going to put my formula inputs directly above the column. That's kind of a convenient way, just so it lines up perfectly. It's easier to read and interpret, although that's not always the case. Sometimes you want it below or off to the side. But in this case, for the taxable pay, I'm going to type exemption amount and 250. Exemption amount, that means the amount that's not taxable, enter, and then I type 250, enter. Now I'm going to come over here, and it looks like we have a tax rate of 10%. So I'm going to type tax rate, enter, and 0.1, control enter, and increase the decimals. What does 10% mean? Well, we're dealing with dollars here. So 10% means 10 parts out of 100. There's 100 pennies in $1. So we're taking 10 pennies out for every $1. Now I'm going to add some formatting, highlight both cells. I already have my red fill, my white font. I'm going to click all borders. Now I'm going to highlight these two cells and all borders. All right, taxable pay equals left arrow to get gross pay minus up arrow to get the exemption amount. And I need to lock it, so I hit the F4 key. Control Enter, double click, and send it down. Be sure to go to the last cell in F2. Cell references are looking good. Deduction, equal sign, left arrow, taxable pay times up arrow to get my tax rate. Control Enter, double click, and send it down. Oh, I see all sorts of trouble, but always go to the last one and hit F2. That's why we use the F2 key. We clearly did 1, 2, 3 cells above as a relative cell reference, and that's not what we wanted. We wanted it locked on D7. Now, when you do this, hit Enter. All we really have to do, since we're copying the formula down, is to edit the top cell. If I double click, it'll automatically replace all the formulas. So at the top, F2. Now remember, in order to lock a cell reference, your cursor has to be touching the particular cell reference. Now if I want to lock D7, it can touch any part of D7. Right there is not touching D7. Before the D, in the middle, or after the 7, those are all touching D7. So now I hit F4 key. I have locked it. Control Enter, double click, and send it down. Immediately go to the last cell and hit F2. That is looking good. Enter. Now net pay. Now I have this formula incorrect up here. Boy, the employee would be mad if we took taxable pay minus deduction. It's actually gross pay minus deduction. So in cell E10, equal sign, left arrow to get our gross pay minus left arrow to get deduction. Control Enter, Double click and send it down. Go to the last cell and hit F2. Relative cell references are perfect. Enter. Now, we used Excel's golden rule to create this little payroll table, this model. We can change the amounts up here if the amounts actually change. Or next period, we simply type new numbers here and everything updates. Now, Excel's golden rule. We want to talk about our final topic, which is we need to look at the reasons why we use Excel's golden rule. Well, we already saw the main reason is it makes our job easy if we need to change something or we need to use this again next time period. But here specifically are the reasons. It's easy to change a formula input when they are listed on the face of the worksheet. We saw that. We change a number, instantly everything updates. So for an exemption amount, that's the amount of your pay that's not taxed. So if I increase this amount, your net pay that you take home is going to increase. So if I change this to 300, you love that. 3170.5, when I hit enter, goes up to 3175.5. Now I'm going to Control Z on that. So changing an input is easy. Number two, it's very hard to accurately and consistently change formula inputs if they're typed directly into formulas, known as hard coding formula inputs into formulas. Here, actually number 5, research has shown that one of the main causes of faulty spreadsheets is hard coding formulas into formulas. And here's what it looks like. And instead of having a cell reference, the person types in 250. Well, guess what? It'll totally work. Control Enter and double click and send it down. But if we didn't have any of this here, and for both of these we hard coded the number in, so when we come back and look at this later, we open this later, we're not quite sure what the formula inputs are. And if you have a whole spreadsheet, which oftentimes we do, in fact, later in the class, we'll do much more complicated payroll examples, and we'll have lots of columns with lots of formulas. Well, what are you going to do? You're going to have to go and dig through and look at each one to find out what all the formula inputs are. So I'm going to Control Z, 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 and Z. Now I have undone all of that and all of these changes. So reasons: 1, it's easy to change. 2, we don't want to hard code. And 5, we don't want to fall prey to the #1 error in spreadsheet history. Also, number 3, the labels for the formula inputs indicate exactly what the formula input represents. So right, we come back and look at this later, we know exactly what that 250 means. Also, number 4, if we list our formula input and label them, we have documented our spreadsheet model accurately. Anyone coming to look at this can easily understand how it was constructed. The final reason is because the inventors of the spreadsheet, Dan Bricklin and Bob Frankston, intended the spreadsheet to follow Excel's golden rule. These two guys, and in particular Bricklin was a guy who had the original idea for a spreadsheet with columns and rows. Bob Frankston was the one who helped a lot with the coding and creating of the first spreadsheet called VisiCalc. But Dan Bricklin's original epiphany was that he didn't want to have to recalculate on a handheld calculator every single number when a formula input changed. So when this changed to 300, when I hit Enter, every one of these instantly update. Whereas before spreadsheets, you either had to be a computer programmer or you had to take out your handheld calculator and calculate 30 separate calculations. So Excel's golden rule, it is amazing. Now I'm going to Control Z. All right, so in this video, we saw Excel's golden rule. We saw it for a payroll example. We saw it for calculating monthly insurance expenses. We saw it for calculating extra points for each student in the class. All right, if you like that video, be sure to click that thumbs up, leave a comment, and sub, because there's always lots more videos to come from Excel is Fun. All right, we'll actually see you next video, video number 4, and we'll talk all about number formatting, and in particular, how it affects formulas. All right, we'll see you next video.